When you visit Arizona, time is measured in moments, not minutes. Like the moment you see the Grand Canyon for the first time. Visit a new state of mind. Learn more at hereyouareaz.com.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining me on today's episode of 20 Somethings. I'm Tico, and I'm a 20 something who spent way too much time debating whether caffeine counts as a drug. Because if it does, I might have a problem. Today, we're switching things up a little. Instead of me just sharing my thoughts and experiences, I'm bringing in someone who can offer a different perspective. My friend, he. He's a little older, but we've known each other for years, and he's got slightly more experience on the topic that we're going to be discussing today. So, today, we'll be diving into a topic that's been debated for decades, which is drug use. But we're not here to preach or push any agenda. This is a real, open, and non judgmental discussion about drugs, the laws around them, personal experiences, and the myths that we've all heard. So I want you to listen with an open mind and maybe even question the narratives we've been given. So, T, how are you? Still there with me?
Yes, I am here. I love the grandeur of your entire
My intro, thank you, thank you. That degree
intro.
in
Yes,
that degree in English literature is coming to good use.
absolutely.
How are you,
Here to
babes?
talk about drugs. I am doing fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So happy to be on your podcast.
Thank you. I'm happy to have you here. Like it really is a pleasure and like I'm so curious to hear like your thoughts and insights and experiences. But before we get into it though, I just want to make a disclaimer. This episode is not here to glorify, promote or encourage drug use, nor is it a dare seminar. I'm not your parent, your therapist or your dealer. I'm just here to have an open, honest conversation with T about something that a lot of young people experiment with, drugs. We would be naive to, not acknowledge that young people, especially, are just curious beings. And, a lot of us have had experience with drugs, whether we want to admit it or not, or we're curious about trying. So, if you're here looking for a Just Say No campaign, you might be in the wrong place. But if you want to have a real talk about why people do drugs, the risks, the highs, the lows, and everything in between, buckle up because we're going deep. And yes, that may or may not have been vaguely sexual. So, T, tell me, why do you think young people in particular are so curious about drug use? Especially, when they're constantly bombarded and inundated with, don't do it, stay away from the devil's lettuce, or else it's gonna fry your
Mhm.
brain. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's
Yeah,
so many like
yeah.
warnings, but they're still wanting to try. Why do you think that is?
I mean, drugs have been around since the beginning of time, have they not? So
They have.
I think it starts there. It's just the intrigue,
Mhm.
the everything that it could be
Right.
is
The,
drugs.
it's
And
just
so it
human nature
starts,
to be curious.
it is. And that's when your curiosity peaks. I
Yeah,
really hate that our older generations tend to make drugs only a bad thing
right.
because it's not a bad thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's really your relationship with it. And you should be smart.
I agree. I agree. And yeah, I don't think it's fair for older people to demonize drugs because it can be like a gateway to so many novel realizations, not just about yourself, but about life, you know? And
Hmm.
your 20s in particular, like they're such a weird, chaotic, confusing time. Like you're figuring out who you are, what you want, how to survive capitalism, why your back suddenly hurts even though you're not 40 yet. And it's it's like a time of exploration, rebellion, and let's be honest, a little self-destruction, you know what I mean? And for a
Yeah.
lot of people, that includes trying drugs. So the last thing that we need at this particular time in our lives is judgment because we have so much on our plate already. And we don't need the critiques, we don't need the bullshit. Like, show us some grace. But yeah, I am. interested in interrogating why drugs are so appealing, especially at this stage in life.
Well,
And
if we're talking about appealing drugs, can we
mhm.
talk about some appealing drugs or some drugs that we have enjoyed
Well,
or
yes, well, yes.
is is that where we're going here? Because I
We're-
think that's going to be the more fun.
I mean, of course, I'm definitely going to get into it. You seem eager to want to like, talk about it. So what kind of drugs have you done, if you don't mind my asking?
So I've done a few.
Hmm.
I've done a few pills. I've done a
What type of
few
bill?
substances.
Oh, okay.
Um,
She dabbles. She's a dabbler.
she dabbled. She's a dabbler.
All right,
So
where
as
did it
far as
start?
pills, it started with Tylenol 3, which is
Wait,
a
wait,
very
wait. You
simple
said it
formula.
started at 3 years old?
No, 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 with the Tylenol 3, a
Oh
Tylenol
my
3.
God.
So
I was like, what?
Tylenol with no, some
Okay,
Americans maybe.
that's
Could you
crazy.
imagine
Child pro
craziness?
Child Protective Services, where are you when we need them? But yes, Tylenol 3.
Tylenol 3. So it's like the most basic form of a narcotic, the
Okay,
first start. So I
right.
had that for pain medication, for pain management, and it felt great.
I'm sure
And
it
I just
did. I'm
noticed,
sure
yeah.
it
So after the pain subsided, I still wanted to continue to feel sometimes a little great.
did. Okay,
And
a little pit
yeah,
me.
that led me down that path of trying different pills. Luckily, that was a short time that
Oh,
didn't get
so
too
wait,
crazy.
so were you addicted?
I don't think I was addicted. No, because it's
Imagine of
never
all the things to be addicted to Tylenol. Oh my God.
literally a Tylenol, right? But no, as far as an addiction, I feel like addiction means that you are dependent on
Right,
whatever it is. Like if I
right.
don't have this, then I need this out of necessity. So
Hmm.
no, have I ever been dependent on any drugs? No, I don't
Okay,
see myself as that.
good. Let's celebrate that. Love that. Love
Let's
that.
celebrate that.
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
so moving on from Tylenol 3, because that was like just first level.
how old were you? Do you remember?
So it's maybe 15 or 16.
Okay. Yeah.
So teen.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there was a lot of people around me smoking the devil's lettuce a little
Mm-hmm.
bit. Um,
Marijuana, Mary Jane Hollins. We
as
know
you
her.
like to call it, you
We
know?
know her. Yeah.
Exactly. We know her and we support her. And I did not, I did not get into marijuana until I was older, until my these years, until my, late 20s, early 30s.
Right, right, right,
That's when I started getting into marijuana.
right.
So I had the opposite of what a lot of people had experienced, I
Mm,
guess, which gave me
right,
a different light for things as well.
right. Do you remember what your
Less
first
jaded.
experience was when you actually tried marijuana? Like, what was that like? Did you get like anxiety or?
No, I got a weightlessness feeling,
Mhm.
and I vacuumed my entire apartment in the dark,
In the dark?
and I said to myself, I really need to be able to see. So I went and
Well,
got a
yes.
flashlight.
Okay,
So I vacuumed my entire apartment with a
okay.
flashlight and a vacuum in the dark. That
That's
was
so
my first
funny. Like,
experience.
you're a hypochondriac when under the influence. Hilarious.
Pretty much, it was
It's that Capricorn energy. I know that's right.
it was a fun time for me. I enjoyed it.
Wow. So, yeah, so
Other
after the
drugs.
Tylenol,
Yeah,
you
after
transitioned to another pill?
yeah, different types of pills. So I started to take benzodiazepines, which are a class of drugs,
Hmm.
also known as central nervous system depressants.
Hmm.
Meaning that it's just slowing down your metabolism. It's making you feel sleepy. It's making you feel nice and warm inside and cozy.
Right.
Um, that
Cozy.
is cozy.
Wait,
So
so
after,
aren't
oh
benzos
god,
like prescribed?
yeah, these are all prescription drugs.
Okay, cool. So
Yeah,
you
these are all
needed
prescription
benzos, like,
drugs.
was it for like, for example, like anxiety disorder, or like depression or something?
No, I was taking these for fun.
Oh,
I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't say that.
oh. No, I mean, no,
But
if that's their
yeah,
truth. But I mean, all right, so it
yeah,
wasn't
that's not
prescribed
true.
for you. You just happened to have access to them.
I happen to know people that knew people that
Well,
could
yes.
move
Well, yes.
things.
And I'm glad you touched on that because so many people do drugs recreationally. Like they just want to feel good, simple as that. Like the euphoria, the altered state of mind, the giggles, the munchies, the deep conversations about whether or not aliens exist. Like, let's be real, drugs can.
Absolutely.
That's why they're like popular at parties, festivals, concerts, because who doesn't want to dance for 6 hours straight with their friends? You know what I mean?
Mm,
So
mm.
yeah, everybody, like a lot of people do drugs recreationally, but yes, back to your time at Benzo's.
My time with benzos. So once I started taking more than three, I said that maybe the benzo's time has come. If I have to take more than three at a time, I'm
Right.
like, okay,
Because
my
you knew,
tolerance is building.
right. So you knew that you were in like a very dangerous zone where it's like, okay, if I don't stop now, this is gonna become like a dependency.
Correct. Like I'm right at that edge.
Right.
And I don't see myself that way, where I need more than whatever I'm getting
Mm-hmm. I see.
to
I
continue.
understand. I'm glad you had enough self-awareness to recognize that, okay, I'm right on the precipice of something dangerous here because honestly, a lot of people
Mhm.
do get carried away where they just want to like keep chasing that high and like escalate things. And then past a certain point, it's like you're beyond the point of return. You know what I mean?
It always ends somewhere.
It does.
And do you want to be happy about where it ended, or do you want to wish that you had ended just a couple days earlier or
Ooh,
whenever it might have been? So,
yes. It's deep.
um, so moving on, I have also tried a few stimulants.
Such as.
Um, so first intro to
Wait.
stimulants.
Before you continue, all of this was during
Oh,
your
oh,
teens? Oh my God.
no, 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 no. We are in into the 20s at this point.
Okay, because I'm just
Maybe
like, you
I would
were
say mid
quite the
20s.
adventurous 15-year-old. Like, oh my God. Like,
I apologize. I skipped some. Uh,
right,
to be full disclaimer today, I've
right.
hit my vape. I've gotten a little stony baloney tonight,
As you
and
should, as you should.
yeah, it's great.
Hmm. Wait, so did you like take a edible just now, or like, is it like actual like smoking?
It's actual smoking.
Oh, okay.
So vape, yeah.
Love that. Love
Any
that.
edibles? Edibles were my first love
Hmm.
because they last so long and you
Right.
can go up and down with them, and it's really a ride.
Listen,
However,
what? I,
sometimes you don't have the
mm-mm.
time.
Sometimes you know what?
Have the time.
No, I never have the time for edibles. I'm sorry. Like, as you know, I've had the worst experiences on edibles. Like,
Mm,
it's it's never a pleasant experience. Like, I feel nauseous. I feel like I'm on the brink of death. Like, I don't like it. Well, don't get me wrong. It depends on the grams, like how many grams you take. Like when we watched Sailor Moon High as Hell on edibles, how many grams was it?
Salamine was a 10 milligram night.
And that was amazing. Like we laughed at
Yeah.
everything. Everything was so fucking funny. Like remember the guy with the glasses? Like every time he
Oh
came
my
on,
God, we couldn't stop laughing about it.
like every time he came on the scene, it was hysterical. But it's like, yeah, like for me, it's just I don't know if it's the way that they're baked. It's just the composition of edibles never hits the right way for me, but I've never had like a bad experience with smoking, for example, weed. So, but also it's
Mhm.
like for me, like if I smoke, I'm concerned about my lungs because then it becomes like hard to breathe or, I get out of breath if I'm like running or
Mhm.
singing or anything like that. So I try not to smoke a lot. But yeah, so continue. Sorry for interrupting.
What are your feelings on substances that might be a little white
Oh,
and powdery and
you know
in
how I feel.
situations?
I mean, you know how I feel about the White Devil. Um, but
Mhm.
personally, I have this theory. And full disclaimer, of course I've dabbled like once or twice, but I have this theory that like cocaine in particular like brings out the worst in people, like the more you take it. I mean, it's fun at first, but then the more you take it, it becomes like a ego trip. And so you become kind of like an asshole. Not you specifically,
Mm,
but like,
mm,
yeah, I've noticed that with people who are like constant users. Not that I know a lot of cokeheads in real life, but it's like, but it's like it's just something I've observed. Like people become very douchey and assholey on like cocaine. Why do you ask? Like, is that where it escalated for you from like pills to coke?
So no, that's actually a new experience, a newer experience for me recently in the
Okay.
past
How did
year. I
you?
never tried it.
Wow. I honestly
Yeah.
like when was it? I want to say, let me do the math. Um, I think it was in early 2022, if not 2021, but I think it was
Okay.
2022. That's when I actually tried it for the first time. It was at this like clothing optional retreat. It was great. The host, he had access to it, and he was like, "Do you want to try?" And I'm like, "No, I'm scared. What if I overdose and die?" And he's like, "No, you'll be fine." I'm just like, no, I'm scared. And he's like, listen, you'll be fine. So I was like, okay. So I tried it. Like I did what like he did it first. Like he showed me. And then I did it. And it was just like, oh, okay. And it felt good. And for some reason I felt like horny. Like it really made me horny. But the irony is like it lasted all of 5 minutes. Like as soon as like 5 minutes ended, it's just like, okay, that was it. So it's like I understand why people become addicted because you're constantly trying to
Hmm.
like, get back to that sensation. But for me, it's like late, was it the same night? Maybe the next night, because it was like a weekend trip. The next night or so, I tried it again, but that experience was different because the place that we are staying at, this villa, it was owned by this guy whose dad was an artist who had all these like paintings and sculptures all across the villa. But they're actually kind of creepy, like eyes watching you everywhere. So I remember I was like high and I was like looking around the room and there are like these eyes everywhere and I was just like freaked the fuck out. And like I felt myself like getting very paranoid. And so I was like, okay, bitch, time to like get this out of your system. So I went into the bathroom. Thank God it was like hot water, like in the shower. So I went in there and I was just like, okay, get this out my system. I was just in my head, I just thought that if I was in the shower like for a long time under hot water, it would help. And it did. So I told myself, you know what? Never a fucking again. Because the last thing I want is to like, the last thing I want to do is like lose my fucking mind on that particular drug. So I vowed
Yeah.
I would never do it again, and I never have. So I don't see myself indulging, but I don't like judge anyone who does, coke
With your experience, do you feel like it would have been different
if I wasn't
if it
surrounded by
weren't?
creepy eyes.
Exactly. Because
I
that's what it sounds like.
I mean, well, in a way, I'm kind of thankful that I had that encounter because, like, it really was like a wake up call that, okay, bitch, don't, get too comfortable. So I'm glad I had that experience.
Mm.
But people when they do it, they're at like a party or they're at like a social
Mhm.
event, and in a way, this kind of was like a social event. I mean, it's called an optional
Mhm.
retreat.
Mhm.
Come on. But I don't know. Well, maybe I can't say, I can't speculate, but I just know for sure I can't see myself doing it again. Like so I
Mhm.
would encourage people who are interested in trying that to do as much research as possible and like if they
Mhm.
aren't curious about it, get a test kit because you don't know if it's laced with anything like fentanyl.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And that's another fear of mine. Like I don't want to be like ODing on something that I think I'm taking when it's really something else. Um,
Mhm.
but what's your experience with cooking been like?
My experience, it was nothing like I expected.
What did you expect?
It's, I guess I expected my heart rate to really just explode and to feel like I was going to have a heart attack,
You
or
wanted
to
to
also feel
die?
like, no, 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 that's how I thought that I would feel. I
Okay.
thought that this would be grabbing the dragon. I thought that this would
Oh.
be really just this crazy ride that I'm not ready for. And it really wasn't. It was more like, okay, this
Mm,
is interesting. Um,
right.
That's what that feels like. Okay, why do I taste this in the back of my throat? It's interesting. This
What did
this
you taste?
it was the powder.
I'm trying to
The
recall. I
powder.
think I did taste something as well. It's a very interesting. It's
Yeah.
kind of sweet, kind of, but also like,
Mm.
what's the word? You feel something like mucusy, kind of. Um,
You feel things awaken. You're just like, ooh,
it's a very interesting sensation for you. But like I said, it
yeah.
doesn't last long. Doesn't last long.
No, it did not last long. It felt I remember being and the person that provided to
Hmm.
me
Right. You're a
uh
dealer.
no, 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 no. This was not a dealer because
I
I was
know.
not purchasing.
Right.
You're hilarious. But the yeah, so they told me, don't worry about it, like you won't be up all night or anything like that. Like this isn't that, but this will help
Right.
keep you up a little bit longer.
Right.
And I was like, okay, let's try it out. And
Right.
I can see how people can get addicted to it.
Oh,
I
for
really can.
sure. It's so easy to fall into that
It
trap.
is
And it's
so easy.
yeah, and it's so funny because it's like what can initially start out as like curiosity can really go into a very dangerous and wild place because for me, I'm a very curious person. That's how most, if not all of my
Mhm.
experiences like started out with drugs, where it's like I'm just like curious, what does it feel like? They hear about the mind expanding effects of psychedelics, for example, or the confidence boost from
Yeah.
stimulants, and they just have to know. That's something that I have experienced, or it's just like I just want to know what it's like. And it's not like somebody pressured me, like one of my peers like encouraged me to do it in the sense of like outside of like that experience with cocaine, but it's like I was
Okay.
always a little bit curious. And that's how it
I
starts for a lot
forgot
of
that we both have a kinship
hmm.
toward psychedelics
Oh
as well.
yes. Oh
Why
yes.
have we not started talking there?
I mean,
That's
hold
probably
your
because we went,
horses, hold your horses.
oh
But
my,
yes, but yeah, honestly, I love psychedelics. Like
yes.
me, I've done like shrooms, and it has always been like an incredibly spiritual experience for me. Honestly, same with marijuana, not gonna lie. Like if I smoke marijuana, I feel like very connected to God. And it's
Hmm.
the same thing with shrooms, but it's more like enhanced. So it's like those are the ones that made me feel like the closest to God. And I don't mean that in like a Jesus take the wheel kind of way. I mean in like a deep cosmic, I am one with the universe kind of way. Everything just
Hmm.
felt interconnected. Colors were brighter. Music just wasn't something I was hearing, it was something I was feeling. I understood what people meant when they talked about ego death. It was humbling and beautiful and expansive. And I definitely would encourage people who want to get in touch with themselves and like, humanity to try psilocybin mushrooms. But of course, I wouldn't encourage them if they have or are related to anyone who has a history with mental illness, because if you're not careful, you can spiral because you can end up in like a thought loop or, get panicked and paranoid and, if you're not careful, you can go crazy, especially depending on the dosage. But always a great experience with shrooms, which I can elaborate on further. But I'm curious to hear about like yours as well, because I've also tried LSD, um, which is another psychedelic, I believe. And
Yes,
with
LSD.
yeah, and with me that was like slightly different when I tried that, which it was just one time, but it when I had that experience, it wasn't so much a connection with God, it was like a connection with me. Like I was listening to music at the time and I felt connected to myself, to my thoughts, to my emotions. And the music was like, oh my God, it wasn't like I was just listening to it. I was inside of it. I could feel the artist's energy, like their intention. Every note is like
Mm.
something I never heard before, but also something I needed to hear in that moment. And it was like the world cracked open and I was seeing the layers beneath everything. It was beautiful. But how about you? What type of psychedelics have you had and what was your experience like?
I've had shrooms.
Mm.
Love psilocybin. I love me some
Amazing.
some shroom tea.
Yeah, I was just about to ask you like if you like had tea with them because people say that shrooms raw taste like shit, but I haven't. I don't know. I've never eaten them raw. I've always had it in tea form or in pill form. I've had shroom pills. They're great.
Oh, nice. Yeah, pills are always one of my faves. But back to psilocybin, my experience with it the first time, once again, I felt like part of the earth and I just melted into it. And then I woke up and then I was old and then I was young again. And then I
Really?
just saw everything, I guess, all in myself. I
Mm,
saw how everything just exists
yes. We're
and
all
doesn't at the same time. We
it does
are.
and it doesn't. That's such a beautiful way of phrasing things. I love that. And I agree. Like,
It's go ahead.
no, you go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, okay. Um, it's the LSD that I took
Mm-hmm.
was a similar experience for me, but it just didn't feel exactly the same. It felt a little bit
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, I just feel altered. With
Right.
psilocybin, I felt like I was learning myself.
Yes.
I felt like I was digging
Mm-hmm.
into myself. I felt like I was
Right.
becoming a whole new person and I was
Mhm.
growing. I felt like I was a shroom.
You felt like you're a
And
shroom. Hilarious.
I felt like I was a shroom. I felt like an organism. I really felt like an
Wow.
organism, just growing.
Wow.
And
You know, it's funny, people
with
say that
LSD, I didn't
about
feel that.
DMT, which I haven't tried, where it's just like you feel
I
like
want to
you're,
try.
yeah, I'm curious about that, but I hear that it's like very intense. You know what I mean? So it's
Mm.
like I'd hate to like, you know, feel like I'm a fucking like coach and get trapped as that coach and like someone sits on me and like I feel squished. Like I'd hate that. I'd
But
hate that.
another thing that needs to be talked about when you're taking psychedelics, set your
Mhm.
intentions. Make
Right.
sure that you're in a safe space. Make sure that you understand what is going on.
Yes,
Make sure that you
for sure.
understand that a trip is about to happen and you will not be in control at
Exactly.
certain points of this
Yes.
trip.
I'm
So
so glad you
accept
said
that and move forward.
yes, because that's something I've had to like learn. I wouldn't say the hard way because it's
The
never
hard way.
no. And I say
You
no
learned it.
because it can be challenging, but I wouldn't say it's difficult because I've learned you have to trust yourself and you have to trust the process and trust whatever
Mhm.
the substance or drug is teaching you in that way. Like, don't resist because the more you resist, the more challenging it's going to be for you. But something I've learned through just maybe subconsciously, I don't know what it is, but in that moment, like if I'm like, for example, stuck in a thought loop where for people who are unfamiliar with what a thought loop is when you have like a thought in your head and your mind just keeps repeating it over and over and over and over again. So you feel like you're going fucking crazy. It's so surreal.
Mhm.
Whenever I'm stuck in like an experience like that, my instinct is to focus on things that are like true and things that I can objectively confirm. So, for example, something like, my name is Tico Phillips. My birthday is September 16th, 1996. I was born in Kingston, Jamaica. Like things like that, like
Mhm.
factual. So it's like,
Mhm.
if, I, for example, have or say something out loud, like if I say something that I cannot confirm, that's when my heart races and then I get like stuck into another thought loop like, is that true? Is that true? Is that true? So for which is so fucking scary. So I'm trying to think of something, for example, that I can't necessarily verify. Um yes, perfect. I got it. Like Jesus was born on December 25th in Bethlehem or something. And it's like, was he? Was his name even Jesus? You know what I mean? Yeah.
Personally, I can't, I'm not a person that's going to talk, I guess,
Mhm.
when I'm in my trip.
Right.
But I am a person who's going to observe
Yeah, for
and
sure.
really
For sure.
collect.
Right. I mean, I don't mean it to say that I'm like there talking to myself like a madman, but it's just like I'm having a I'm having like a conversation where it's just like, like when you're debating something and you need like a second opinion, and so you're like, I should do this. Actually, no, girly pop, like maybe you shouldn't do this. It's more like it's more like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Um,
okay, okay, I get
so
that.
yeah, and that's how it is when you're having a thought loop. Something is just stuck in your mind and you can't focus on anything else
Hmm.
but that thing. But yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned, your experience with shrooms because like can I elaborate on like what two specific ones were for me, two experiences that I had that were like really like
Yes.
okay. Like the first time I tried it, I want to say it was definitely before the pandemic for sure. Definitely during college. Let's say 2018, right? It might have been 2019, not sure, but it's definitely when I was in college. And there was this guy on campus who I happened to knew had access to them. And so I got some from him. I was like 22 maybe. And so I had it and I was home alone. And because I tend to do it things like if I'm doing a drug, I have to be by myself because I don't want anyone to influence the trip negatively. So I was home alone and I remember like I took it and I was at the bottom of the stairs in my house in the living room. And for some reason, I remember like falling down to my knees to the bottom of the stairway and I started to cry. And I'm just like, in my head, for some reason, the top of the stairs, which is where I wanted to go, I didn't deserve to go there. Because in my head, the stairway at the top was a route to heaven. And like,
Mm,
I thought that like I should be in hell. And so I was there at the bottom of the stairs, bawling my eyes out. And in on the staircase in my house, there are like some like not holes, but you can see beneath the stairs. You know what I mean? Like, does that make sense? Like you can see beneath the stairs, like
yeah.
what's below it, right?
Hmm.
And when I look through the little uh holes in the stairs, in my head, I could see like a cave, but the cave was like dark and wet and deep. And in my head, that was hell. And
Mm,
people say hell is like fire and brimstone, but that wasn't my interpretation of hell. Hell was like lonely and dark and divorced from God
mm,
and cold. And in my head, I was just like, that's where I should be. And so I'm there, like looking down into this deep, cavernous, like thing and crying. And the voice of God that was in my head like, was just like, my child, don't you know you're like fearfully and wonderfully made? Like, you deserve heaven, you deserve grace. Come to me, my child. And I was just like, but God, I can't do it. And I'm there talking to myself, like thinking that I'm talking to God. And I'm like, God, please. And he's like, I crafted you and I was intentional with, how I designed you and you are worthy. And, he basically encouraged me to come up the stairs, crawl. I was crawling because I didn't feel like strong enough to stand up. So I eventually crawled my way up to the stairs. And it's just like, I, the minute I went there, it's just like crying, 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 crying. It was insane, absolutely insane.
it
And
sounds like it.
but it was such a profound, deeply spiritual experience for me, and I felt connected to God and the universe, and it was beautiful. And then I took a bath, and I was just like, "Wow, I'm being baptized, cleanse me of my sins." It was amazing. Um, and then another time, which was like kind of different, but I remember I was like listening to music, and I think it was my own music at the time. Honestly, most of my experiences on drugs include music, which is
Music is
interesting.
great. Music is a unifier. Music
It
is
is.
that universal language that we all use.
It is. So I remember I was listening to my music and I, for some reason, I had this vision while under the influence of shrooms that I was responsible for sending my fans to hell. And there was something so, like, I saw like that vision in my mind's eye of like sending thousands of people to hell with my music. And there was like this sense of responsibility, but I still did it anyway. Where it's just like I felt like I had to, pursue it. I had to create still, even at the implication of, you know, being responsible for the demise of thousands and thousands of people. And I don't recall if I myself went to hell in that vision. Maybe I did, not sure. But I say all of that to say it was worth it. And I've had a couple of instances as well, separate from that, on shrooms, where I did listen to my music and I was just like, wow, bitch, I'm so proud of you. You did that. But yeah, shrooms is always like a spiritual experience for me. And the first time I had a really bad experience with drugs was on ecstasy. Like, I was like 21 and like that one scared me, ecstasy. I thought it was ecstasy, MDMA, but I'm not.
MDMA.
Yeah, but it might have been something else, but I'm not sure. But all I know is like it was supposed to be euphoric, but it wasn't for me. It was just too much. Like I was listening to Gaga at the time, and I think I was listening to Born This Way, and something about that experience just felt inauthentic. I felt like Gaga was being dishonest and artificial, and it felt in that moment like everything I knew was a lie. And my heart started to race, and my body felt out of control. And for a minute, I genuinely thought I was going to die. I was like, oh my God, I'm having an overdose. So I went into the bathroom, into the shower, and like I was trying to, calm myself down because that's the first time I had like a thought loop. And that's where the whole idea of like telling things truthful came to be. Because, if I'm in my drugged out state, convinced that everything I know is a lie, I'm like, okay, let me focus on things that are factual. Like, okay, my name is Tico, I'm a Virgo, my birthday is September 16th, things like that. So I had to like tell myself the truth in order to like stabilize myself. I was in the bathroom for like God knows how long. It felt like minutes to me, but turned out being hours because I remember my mom knocked at the door, knock, knock, knock. Are you okay, Tico? And I'm like, no. She's like, what's wrong? I'm like, I have to tell you something. So I opened the door and she's like, what is it? And I'm like, hi, don't be upset, but I am under the influence of a drug. I think I'm having an overdose. By the way, I think I'm gay. You know what I mean? So it was just like it was a crazy, very crazy experience. Yeah. So that's just a reminder that like not all drugs are for everyone. And that's a like very important lesson to learn. You know what I mean?
I enjoyed Molly. I enjoyed ecstasy. I enjoyed the MDMA. I had a great experience. Once again, I wonder if it's how you're taking or how
Perhaps.
you're being introduced.
Right. Because like I said, I wasn't
That,
particularly sure that that was actually ecstasy. Like I got it from some
hmm
they told me it was, but I didn't have access to a testing kit or something, you know what I mean, to actually be completely sure. Um,
hmm
so yeah, but like I said, some drugs, especially psychedelics, have been used for spiritual exploration, which we can both attest to. Um,
Yes.
shrooms, ayahuasca, which I haven't done, but would be curious to do.
I
Those
can't wait to do ayahuasca or
But don't we have
peyote.
to go to fucking like South America to do that or something? Like it's a ritual.
Yeah,
Like
for
it's
sure.
not just something you do
Yeah,
recreationally. You have to be like
yeah,
like introduced to it by like a shaman or something. So
yeah.
I'm open to
I
it
still
for
can't wait to try it. One day in
for
my future,
sure.
it
As
will
long
be in there,
as
and
long
I
as you
want
know
it.
that those substances, that particular one, isn't just about getting high. It's about connecting to something bigger than yourself, whether it's the universe, God, nature, or your own subconscious. And I'm curious to know what that is will be like for you, especially since you're like an atheist.
I don't consider myself an atheist. I say
Ag-
agnostic
Agnostic.
because, yeah, I'm without. And
Okay,
I like to still think that every time you try a substance, you should have an intention that you're setting.
sure.
So if I am trying ayahuasca or peyote, which is another substance that's similar, but
Mhm.
I'm sure not as hallucinating and eye-opening and things that they
Right.
talk about with ayahuasca. But I will have the experience that I have, and I'm going to be excited about any experience that it is. I hope that it's
Sure.
not going to be a bad one. I know that I am a person that likes to stay grounded and
Yes.
likes to stay with the earth. So
Right.
I am ready for it whenever it happens.
Good. Are there any drugs that you wouldn't try? Because I know for me, like heroin, absolutely the fuck not, because I'm afraid of
Hmm.
needles. I have an aversion to needles, so I'd probably never get a tattoo for that reason. Meth,
Hmm.
I'd never,
Hmm.
never do meth. Meth mouth
No.
scares me. I have a great smile. I'd hate to ruin it because of meth. That so meth mouth is alone is enough to keep me away. And also just how fucked up people get on heroin and meth. Like, no thanks. So how about
Hmm.
you?
So I would never do heroin or meth either. I can
Okay.
agree with that. I would never do crack.
Crack is
Um,
what?
Crack is cheap, honey.
You
So
make
I would
too
stay
much
away from
money to
those
ever
class.
smoke crack. Let's get that clear.
Literally, things are down bad when you're down at crack. So I don't want to ever have like a
Right.
spoon cooker or like this this my lighter underneath it and whatever it is on top of it is bubbling. Like I want to stay
Right.
away from those types of
Right.
things, and I want to stay in the realm that I'm in, where I
Exactly.
can dabble a little bit and kind of see what I like, see what I don't like, and understand that I'm just trying to have a good time at times. And
Real.
also, I'm trying to learn more at other
Real.
times.
What do you do? Ketamine?
Hell yeah. I have been looking out for a good source in my area. I have been
You're
actively looking. And that's how
wow.
that's how I've come across things is I ask, I
Right.
don't just take the first person that tells me
Right.
to take a drug or to show me something,
Of
that's when I'm going to
course.
take it.
You
No,
have to do
I'm going
your
to take it when I
research.
trust.
Exactly.
Yes.
So you're not paranoid about being stuck in like a K-hole or anything like that.
I heard about it. I heard that the best way out is a little bump of below. I don't know.
Pumping that.
That gets you right back. I've heard. So
Right.
I don't. No, I'm not afraid of that. I'm not afraid of that.
Okay. You know what's interesting to me? It's just interesting to me how like some drugs are considered like legal while others aren't. And the reasoning behind it often feels like arbitrary. Because for instance, like alcohol, which technically is a drug, like it lowers your inhibitions and it has like a long history of like causing violence and is equally as
Hmm.
addictive as any like class 3 or 4 drug. But it's legal.
Hmm.
Meanwhile, psychedelics like mushrooms, known for expanding your consciousness and helping with mental health, are still illegal in many places. Thankfully, shrooms are legal here in Jamaica, but I'm not sure about your state. And
It is not legal in the U.S.
uh,
mostly.
just
Yeah, I think it's maybe 2 states.
and it's sad, very sad, because it's such like a
Yeah.
profound substance. We can both agree. Um,
Hmm.
and the sad part is it's our government who decide what is a controlled substance, but it's just funny to me because let's not forget these are the same people who literally ran MK Ultra experiments, drugging people without consent. And like people have this idea that like if you criminalize drugs, that will prevent use, but it doesn't. It just pushes it underground. And it's just like alcohol prohibition did back in the day, you know? So it's like it didn't stop people from going underground to get liquor. Like they did find a way. And that's the thing. Like when drugs are pushed underground, it becomes even more dangerous because you don't
And
know. Go ahead.
before you get off of that topic, I just want that's the system. That's the way it's designed. That's the
Yes.
way it's meant. That government, that's how they keep control, is they release
Yes.
certain drugs into certain areas. And this is not anything that's, yeah, it's sad that it works this way. And it
It
brings down
is
a lot of
sad.
people.
It is sad. And there are so many countries that have decriminalized all drugs. And guess what? Addiction rates went
Hmm.
down, overdoses went down, and people were
Hmm.
able to get help instead of getting locked up. So
Hmm.
I kind of wonder what's the real goal of drug laws. Is it public safety or control? Because, like I said, criminalization, it doesn't stop drug use. If anything, it makes the drug more dangerous. And when something is illegal, it moves to the black market where there's no regulation, no quality control, and a higher risk of overdose or contamination. Like, look at the opioid crisis. Like, people aren't dying because they're taking too many prescribed painkillers. They're dying because fentanyl is being laced into street drugs and they have no way of knowing. let me just clarify. Of course, people are dying from prescription painkiller addiction and,
It's real.
overdoses. But
I've seen
compared
them.
to like the street drugs that are being laced with things, like there's a disparity there.
There is, and a lot of people started with pills and then switched over to those stronger
Exactly.
substances. And now,
Case in
because
point
fentanyl also
yourself
used to be, well, no, I wouldn't say myself like that because once again, my
is a
pill
gradual
use,
progress.
it was a very gradual process. And then that was a long time ago. That
Hmm.
was, we're talking, 10 to 15 years ago when
Right.
I was introduced to pills. And maybe I'll still take a Dilaudid if you give me one. I'll still take uh, a Vicodin if you have one.
Right.
Absolutely. But now I don't have any access to them, so it's a lot easier to not
Right.
take them.
Right.
But with the other substances, yeah, I'm happy with dabbling.
Yeah, of course. And I don't know, it's just I'm always been curious about like these myths, like these so many myths around the drug use. Like, for example, like the idea of like using any drug automatically makes you an addict. Like that's not true. Like
Mm,
plenty of people use
yeah.
substances recreationally without developing a dependency. Case in point yourself, like you're not addicted to
Hmm.
it, as far as I know. And addiction is complex, I will agree. And it's influenced by mental health, trauma, and environment, not just the drug itself. Like there's so many things that influence somebody being addicted, and it's not just this one thing. It's like a
Hmm.
compounding of different things. And there's this other myth that weed is a gateway drug, which like honestly, like my first encounter with weed, I was probably like 15. Like I never really smoked it, but I remember I was like in my cousin's house who was like a very big stoner. And he had like weed buds like lying around, like, like smoked weed. But I didn't know
Hmm.
anything about weed. So I thought that if I lit it, it would like light and I could inhale it and, get high. But nothing happened. So I was like disappointed. But eventually I was curious enough to find out what it was like. And so yes, weed was the first drug I tried. Although, if we consider
It was
alcohol,
your gateway.
it was, I guess, I'm kind of like
You got
contradicting
gatewayed.
myself. Right. But I guess if we're honest, I mean, the biggest gateway drug is probably alcohol because I've had alcohol earlier than that. Like maybe like when I was 11, that's the first time I drank alcohol. You know what I mean? Um,
Hmm.
so most people start with drinking before they ever touch anything else. So why does weed get that reputation as like this gateway drug?
Because weed is bad.
Right?
In quotation, like because that's the bad one, and that's the bad one
Ironic.
right now.
The devil's
And
lettuce.
it's the devil's, but it's got healing properties, and you can't die from smoking too much weed. You can't die from ingesting too much THC. You will have a hell of a trip. You might have other things happening in your body, but there are very few people that actually die from it.
Right.
If it, I don't know if there's any. Whoever checks.
Wait, die from like weed?
Die from THC overdose. Like
Mm.
THC, have you ever heard of a THC overdose?
Oh, what is that?
There isn't one. My point.
Real.
Yeah,
So
my
real.
point. Like,
So real. And it's so funny because here in Jamaica we're known as like weed central, but weed is technically illegal here. It's like decriminalized, but it's not legalized. So you can have possession of up to like 2 ounces for like legal or medical or religious purposes. But it's funny, like nobody really takes weed for medical or religious purposes. We just do it because we can.
yeah, why
And
not?
it's it's just that's why I'm like, it just doesn't make sense where certain drugs are like criminalized because it's not legal here, but yet it's so embedded in our culture, and it's like one of our main exports in terms of like the iconography of Jamaica. So it's just like you think we'd capitalize on it instead of like sending people off to jail for doing something that we promote as like come to Jamaica, get high, Jamaica no problem. You know what I mean? Like it's just very strange. Very, very
Mm.
strange. But yeah, I'm remembering something you said earlier. Like you're touching upon your experiences with, pills that were prescribed to someone else that you had access to. But talking about like, your ADHD, you don't have to get into detail with it, but like in terms of like what helps with that? Amphetamines, like what helps?
Yeah. So taking a stimulant for some people,
Mm,
helps their brain, I guess, catch up or helps their body catch up to their brain.
right. And that's like speed,
Because
right? Amphetamines.
yeah, it's the type of speed. Amphetamine is speed, is the street term,
Mm-hmm.
which there's always a street drug for any type of narcotic or anything like that. There's always something.
Right.
But
And I feel like that's just so interesting to me, where it's just like there are certain connotations with different things, like amphetamine. Like, what's the prescribed version of amphetamine?
it's still amphetamine.
Okay, so it's just so funny that like amphetamine is like legal, but there's like an illegal version of it, right?
Meth,
Meth, exactly. And then heroin,
methamphetamine.
yes, and then heroin is illegal, but morphine is legal. But they're
Hmm.
basically like
Hmm.
the same type of opioid. So it's just interesting how like certain things are like,
Oncology.
there we go. But yes, continue.
Hmm.
You're telling me about your experience with medication.
With medication, as far as Adderall, it really helps
Adderall,
personally
that's the word
from.
I was looking for. Yes.
Oh, okay. The name of it. So that's the
Mm-hmm.
name
Yes.
of the actual brand or
Mm-hmm.
the pill type. But that one for me, it helps with keeping me on track. It helps me remember exactly what the hell I was working on. Because sometimes I'll talk and I forgot what I said 10 seconds ago. Or you can ask me, you can
Basically,
ask
how
me,
did amphetamines, Adderall help you with your ADHD?
how do they help me?
Yeah, how do they help you?
They help me by staying on task. They help me by catching up to me so that I can keep my thoughts
Mm-hmm.
going the same direction.
Right.
I'm a
But you
person whose mind goes everywhere.
same, same. I don't think I have
Yeah.
ADHD, but I am definitely an overthinker. But you haven't gotten like dependent on Adderall or anything like that, because it is easy to get addicted to it.
It is easy to get addicted to. I try to go, I try to do it when I need it or take it when I
Mm-hmm.
like really need it. And then I also take a low dose. So I have a psychiatrist I check in with regularly. I have a
Right.
get yourself a mental health care team. Get
Yeah,
yourself a mental health care team and be okay with knowing and checking in with yourself and finding out exactly what's going on
for
is the
sure.
best thing that I can recommend to a lot of people.
I agree.
And not everything's going to be great, not everything's going to be fun, but at least you'll have the knowledge.
Right. And I'm glad that you mentioned, those types of like harm reduction strategies, because that is such good advice when you have like a good supportive network around you, because so many
Mhm.
people who are susceptible to addiction tend to feel isolated because they don't have that support. And it's part of the reason why I love watching Intervention, that show. It's like it really puts things into perspective for me. Um and kind of teaches me, that it's so easy to fall off the straight and narrow and become dependent on substances.
Mhm.
But not just that, it's like I look at some of my idols, like people in music who I look up to, like Sly Stone, for example, who was a genius. He and his band, Sly and the Family Stone, like they changed music forever with, their mix of like funk and rock and soul. But
Mhm.
his visionary brilliance was ultimately overshadowed by heavy drug use. Like he did cocaine and PCP, angel dust, and those took over, and it led to him becoming erratic, and it led to that behavior influencing him, missing his shows and becoming late and getting in trouble with the law. And it destroyed his once groundbreaking career. Like, and that devastates me because he had so much influence. Like he really influenced like even Janet Jackson's Rhythm Nation, which is in like phenomenal. You know what I mean? Same with
Mhm.
Whitney Houston, who is one of the
Mhm.
greatest vocalists ever,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
her crack cocaine addiction dragged her down. And in the end, it took everything. Like we saw her immense talent and success unravel due to a long struggle with substance abuse. Like drug addiction contributed to her tragic downfall. It tarnished her legacy and ultimately led to her death. And that terrifies me. You know what I mean? Like with someone like me who's like, my personality is like kind of addictive. It's easy to get addicted to
Yes.
things. I know I'm like more vulnerable to that, especially in an industry full of yes men. It's so easy to lose yourself when no one tells you no. And then it doesn't even have to be like hard drugs. Like look at Michael Jackson. Like he was hooked on prescription pills, like painkillers, sedatives, anesthetics, like propofol. So, even under the care of your doctors, you can like be dependent on a drug, So it's like,
Absolutely.
yes, it really does frighten me for sure. Um,
And it's fair to be frightened by that, but what they were doing, those famous people were
mhm.
stars.
Right.
And some stars get really, 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 really bright.
Hmm.
And they die a lot sooner because they got so bright. And then
Right.
there are other stars that don't get as bright and they stay dim and they're able to stand the width of time.
Hmm.
And I really feel bad for some of those people.
Right. For sure.
But I just, I don't know if that equates to the everyday person or the person who is like really checking in with themselves mentally and
Hmm.
really seeing it
Right.
and
No,
understanding themselves.
for sure. And it all goes back to your support system because if you have people who actually care about you, they'll help you get rehab.
Hmm.
But you have to want it. You have to want it. Like, if you don't want to change, then, it's going to be a very dark and lonely road for you. But
True.
have you thought about like the pros and cons of like drug use? Like, in
Of
terms of
judging? Absolutely.
like,
Absolutely. You start to look a little bit older every once in a while. You look in the mirror and you say,
wait, is
"Ooh,
that a pro or a con?
that's a con. That is a
I know.
con.
All right,
It does age you."
let's talk about the potential positives first. So of course you have the euphoria, the relaxation, the introspection, the spiritual and emotional breakthroughs. Sometimes you can really bond with people, have very deep conversations,
Absolutely.
heightened sensory experiences, and in some cases there are therapeutic benefits like microdosing. But what are some risks and consequences that you're talking about?
So other risks
Mm-hmm.
besides the effects on your skin possibly and the
Yep.
dehydration
And your
with some
teeth.
drugs and your teeth.
Yep.
Um, I am happy that once again, just personally, take care of yourself. Look at the mirror, check yourself in the mirror, look at old pictures of yourself. If you see
Right.
yourself changing at any time, that's when you really need to have a check-in with yourself.
Yep.
Sometimes it's not just your age, but sometimes it's the things you are doing. And are
Hmm.
you treating your body as it should be treated?
Right.
Other cons, after I have jumped off of my um, little soapbox there,
Yep.
um, other kinds, addiction in general.
Yes.
Like if you do anything for too long, you will become addicted to it. You will become just, it will become a necessity.
Of
So I
course.
think life is about movement and life is about change.
Of
And if
course.
you're not changing, then you are just, what are you doing? You're just lifing.
In
I
like
want to
a
live.
snake eating its own tail, like just
Mhm.
yeah. Not to mention like the bad trips and the panic attacks and the paranoia, and as you
Mhm.
mentioned, the physical health risks like heart issues, dehydration, or your serotonin depletion because you're always chasing that high that you'll never completely get back to that first high
Mhm.
that you got, and so it does have a toll on you. Not to mention the legal consequences, because let's not forget the law exists. And not really knowing what actually you're taking, like fentanyl contamination is a real thing, you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
I guess what we're trying to say is like, if you're going to do it smart. Like, you have to be responsible. And we're not here to tell you what to do with your life, but if you're going to experiment, at least do it responsibly, you know what I mean? Because there's a difference between mindful exploration and reckless use. So I guess I would recommend knowing your source. Like if you don't know where it's coming from, think twice, which you've alluded to before, where he's like, you're not going to take something if you don't know who it's from. Um,
Hmm.
there are too many horror stories about less substances, which I'm very concerned about for sure. Test your stuff if it's possible. If you have access to a test kit, use it. Fentanyl is being found in everything from party drugs to pressed pills. And of course, hydrate. If you're doing MDMA or coke, drink water, but don't overdo it. Your body needs balance because there is such a thing as like water intoxication as well. And basically have a trip sitter, like I said. Like if you're taking something strong, have a sober, experienced friend with you because safety is important.
Yeah.
But yeah, final thoughts. At the end of the day, drugs are complicated. Like they can be enlightening, destructive, euphoric, terrifying, healing, dangerous, all of the above. But the experience depends on the person, the substance, and the intention behind it. And she can agree that our experiences with drugs have shaped the way we've seen the world. But I personally know the risks and I respect them. So if you're going to experiment, do it with awareness, with care, and with respect for your own limits. Because the goal isn't just to get high, it's to actually live. So
Yes.
yeah, so I'm going to close this episode now. But if you're listening, I want you to walk away from this episode questioning everything you thought you knew about drugs. I'm not telling you to go out and do drugs, but I am saying that education and critical thinking are way more powerful than fear and stigma. Before we go though, T, is there anything else you'd like to add?
The only thing that I'm adding is that I was thinking about a bumper sticker that says drugs, it's complicated.
Yes. Well, yes, I agree.
I love
We're
it.
complicated. Everything is
Yeah.
complicated.
Drugs, we're complicated. How about that? But thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming. I had an amazing time and thanks for sharing your insight. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to catching up as soon as possible. And
Absolutely.
thank you again for listening to 20 Some Things. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.